What's up, guys? Tim Little. Welcome back to Tactical Bassin. Today's video, we are talking everything lipless crankbaits, why you need to be throwing them right now. This little guy right here, lipless crankbaits, they're one of the most effective fall bass fishing lures because the way they're designed, the way they mimic bait fish, they're perfectly matched to what these fish are eating right now. And if you're not throwing one of these right now, you're leaving fish out in the lake. So today we're covering all of it. We're covering rods and reels and gear and hook upgrades, baits, how to fish them, why to fish them, and everything in between. So let's get started. Why lipless crankbaits are so deadly in the fall? There's really 3 or 4 reasons. Bass are in fall transition, right? They're transitioning, we have colder water, they're on the move, and they're chasing bait fish, whether it's shad or herring or perch. If you have those in your fishery, these fish are moving. They're following those bait balls to like creek arms, the backs of little pockets, channel swings. They're on the move, and these bass are chasing them. Being able to cover water, fishing effectively but efficiently is key this time of the year. And I'm not sure that there's a better bait to do that with than a lipless crankbait. They are so versatile, and we're going to talk about that later in this video. But understand that with these cooler nights, you see the leaves are changing, right? We got orange and red and yellow leaves, lots of bare branches. That means winter is on its way. I think the first day of winter this year is December 21st. So we still have quite a while, but we're in that fall fishing time, and it's an amazing time to be out on the water. But these fish are on the move. They're trying to feed up. They're chasing these bait balls, like I said, whether it's shad or perch or herring, whatever it may be. Those bait balls are moving to the backs of pockets. They're using the creek channels or the ditches to get back there. You know, this time of the year, these fish can be ultra shallow, but more importantly, they're aggressive. So finding those active fish is key this time of the year. Covering water quickly, covering water efficiently is how you get it done and have some of the best days of the entire year. And doing it with a lipless crankbait is a lot of fun. So like I said, you can cover areas fast. They mimic a bait fish, like a fleeing bait fish, really, really well. The real tight action on these baits, the real tight, you know, they're lipless, right? They don't have a lip, so they're real tight, wobbling. They have great sound, and they just mimic a fleeing bait fish extremely well. So with that tight action, that tight wobble, being able to fish it fast, being able to fish it different retrieves. We're gonna talk about retrieves here in a little bit as well. But being able to throw this thing a long ways, fish it fast, cover a lot of water, find those aggressive fish, that lipless crank is a must this time of the year. Now, you can also trigger bites, right? Even if these fish don't want to eat, maybe they're not in a bite window, or they're kind of shut down. Maybe you're in a post-frontal condition situation, or whatever it may be. Being able to change up your retrieves can trigger the bites with a lipless crankbait. We're going to talk about that, like I said, in a little bit. And then they can be fished basically in less than 6 inches of water, all the way out to 30 or 40 feet of water. So they're super, super versatile. Now, the one other thing I do want to talk about real quickly before we dive into these baits, I mentioned how versatile a lipless crankbait is, okay? There are several ways to fish them, but one of the things that makes them work so well this time of the year, besides the tight wobble and the great sound and the fishability, we have lowering or dropping water temps. And on grass fisheries, you guys can see this grass line out here. We got a grass line behind us. We got a grass line out here. But with those water temps dropping, that grass starts to die back. And these fish are going to vacate the grass. They're going to pull to hard cover, whether that's chunk rock or hard bottom transition or laydowns, or, you know, maybe it's an actual rock pile or dock pilings. But if you still have lively grass this time of the year, those fish are going to vacate that dying grass and go migrate to that that lively grass. They're going to move to that lively grass. And fishing a trap or a lipless crankbait, a lot of people call them traps. A lot of people call them, you know, it's basically the rattle trap. That's the OG right there, the original. That's why they call them traps. But lipless crankbaits as a whole, there's a bunch of baits in the category, but being able to fish along that grass line can really produce a lot of bites this time of the year. And then again, fishing over the tops of grass or getting it hung up in the grass and ripping it through can trigger those bites, even when those fish aren't actively feeding. But knowing where these fish are going is half the battle, right? So like I said, following those creek channels into the backs of these creek arms or backs of bays, backs of pockets, they want to corral these bait fish. Now, we did a whole video just a few weeks ago about where do fish go during the fall. So you can go watch that. And that kind of talks about where these bait fish are migrating to and where the bass are going and following them and eventually getting to before we get into full-blown winter. But understanding that fishing that lively grass, fishing the ditches, you know, the grass edges, the ditches, the backs of the cuts, the creek channels, little backs of the bays where they can congregate and corral these bait fish will produce a ton of bites for you. But that's typically where I fish a lipless crankbait, whether it's on vast flats like we have here on Chickamauga or Guntersville, you know, where you have flats that go miles and miles and miles. You know, just a few weeks ago, they were vast grass flats, but now you have that grass dying back and you have more congregated lively grass. And that's where I'm gonna fish these. And then, like I said, current seams, if you're on a river system, you know, steep bluff walls along the transition, but these bait fish are moving to the backs of pockets. They're going to move from the main lake to the backs of pockets. So I'm going to use these little transition ditches, which is what we have here. We got a mouth of a backwater right behind us. We got the main river channel out here, and these fish are going to be in that deeper cut moving to the back. And again, these guys are key to catch them this time of the year. But transition areas, these fish are on the move. And that's why it's so important to be able to throw a bait that covers water quickly, fishes efficiently. It doesn't matter if you're throwing up to 6 inches of water, which I do a lot of times this time of the year. You'll see the bass back there blowing up and the shad will be flickering on the mud or the shoreline because they're so shallow. You know, a lot of times we're making such long casts that we can't even get the boat even close to where these fish are at. It's so shallow. But we're making bomber casts, and on the first or second handle turn or hop, we're getting bit. You know, these guys really get the job done this time of the year. So before we talk about some of my key baits, I have like 4 or 5 for you. Before I talk about the key baits, I really try to simplify it for you. You know, you guys can see I have a whole, you know, the rabbit hole, right? Matt and I love rabbit holes. You know, here's my boat lipless crankbait box. All different sizes, all different colors, different sounds, different actions, different wobbles. But I'm really gonna simplify it for you and give you 4 or 5 of my favorite, most confidence baits I have the most confidence in, have caught the most big fish on or with. And then hopefully after this video, it'll give you guys enough confidence and point you in the right direction. That way you can go to Tackle Warehouse or your favorite local tackle shop and grab just a couple off the peg and go out and catch a lot of fish. So let's talk about the different types of retrieves. And I've mentioned this bait, so I've mentioned how versatile it is so many times already in this video. And the reason being, I'm gonna try not to get these snagged out here during this presentation. I'm sitting in like 3 feet of water. So there are several ways to throw a trap. You've probably heard of ripping a trap or yo-yoing a lipless crankbait. You know, there are 3 or 4 different ways that I like to fish a lipless crankbait. If you want to go to your local favorite tackle shop or a Walmart or whatever, pick yourself up a original rattle trap, or this guy right here is the hammer trap. It's also by Bill Lewis. You can see it comes with EWG hooks. We're gonna talk about that here shortly. If you just want to go out, grab a bait, fire it out there and burn it back, it'll work this time of the year, especially if you're on fish that are actively feeding on a bait ball, right? You see the blowups, you see the boils. This is a great way to chuck and wind, cover water, fish fast, and find aggressive fish. Again, it's super easy. Literally throw it out there and reel it in like you would a spinnerbait or a crankbait. You know, you can always change your cadences, right? We always talk about that burn, 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 pause. You know, you can actually put a little hop in there. But if you want it super easy, super simple, just the chuck and wind straight retrieve is a really, really easy way to cover water and catch fish this time of the year. It helps you eliminate water quickly, and that's really key when these fish are on the move, right? When you're trying to figure out where they are in that transition, in that migration, being able to fish fast but efficiently and cover water and eliminate water really helps this time of the year. So the straight retrieve, I like it when it's a little bit warmer, right? So today, I don't have the graphs on yet, but we're in the mid to high 50s. So the water's not super cold yet. The fish are fairly active. So that's when I like that straight retrieve. Or if I'm fishing just along a big grass flat, and I'm fishing along that grass edge, just throwing it along that grass edge and burning it past can really generate bites. And again, we're talking about covering water and eliminating water, okay? The next retrieve, it's probably my favorite and has produced the most amount of giant bites. Several fish over 10 pounds. That's gonna be the yo-yoing technique. You guys have probably heard about yo-yoing a lipless. It's really, really easy. It's a lot like stroking a jig, okay? As the water temps start to cool and the fish get a little bit more lethargic, or you found that key area, that key grass patch that you're fishing the edge of, or it's an isolated boulder or a hard section of bottom around that's surrounded by maybe mud or something like that. All I'm doing, I'm letting that bait hit bottom, and I'm just lifting my rod tip. I'm going from like, I'll do it over here from the side, from like 10 o'clock. Oh, I knew that was gonna happen. 10 o'clock to like a 12 o'clock. Come on. This time of the year with water so shallow, there is a lot of structure. I should say, a lot of cover in the water. What do we got here? Oh, we got a tree branch. Now, I'll use this real quickly to... Lipless crankbaits have come a long way in recent years. Bill Lewis has made leaps and bounds. You know, like I said, they're the original inventor of that rattle trap. Now they have the hammer trap, but you can see both of these baits come out of package with EWG upgraded hooks. So we'll talk about that here in just a second, but let me try and do this again. So basically like let's just say a 9, let it hit bottom, 9 to 12. Just enough to feel that bait go and then fall, okay? Now there's special baits. When we talk about the baits, there's specific baits that I really like for this technique, 3/4 ounce baits that fall faster. And again, triggering those fish to bite, they eat on that fall, and you will get some of the hardest jig bites you've ever had while fishing. So like 9 or 10 to noon, just enough to, and you can pop, or, again, I'm not trying to get this thing all hung up, but let it hit bottom and just slow. Let it fall. Reel your slack down, up, let it fall. Yo-yoing, that has produced so many big fish for us. In fact, at the end of every video, you'll see there's a picture of Matt and I, and we're holding 8 fish total. We're each holding a 4-pack. That day, all of those fish, every single one of those fish were caught on a lipless crankbait, and we had 10 fish for almost 82 pounds, and over an 8-pound average. I mean, so every video, that outro video clip where we're holding up those 4-packs, it's me and Matt. Every single one of those ate a lipless crankbait on the yo-yo. So that just shows you how effective these baits are. You know, right now and in pre-spawn and spring, they are amazing. So that's the yo-yo technique. Now the other technique that a lot of guys like to do. You hear about ripping a trap. Again, that involves grass. So as these grass lines are dying back and you find that lively grass, you basically reel this bait to the grass and then you rip it out. Rip it out. Rip it out. So what that's doing, reel this in before we get hung up. What that's doing, that's mimicking a bait fish shooting out of the grass. So being able to rip that trap out of the grass, and again, you're not trying to get this thing buried where you're completely hung up. You're just trying to get it barely stuck and then rip it out, right? You don't need to be trying to pull up a whole glob of grass. And we have some specific baits for that as well, that technique. But understanding generating those reaction strikes, those reaction bites are key. And being able to rip that bait through that grass can really produce some key big bites for you. You know, if you're fishing up north, you might have sandgrass, or you have, you know, some dying grass down there on bottom. It's only 6 inches or so. Being able to rip that stuff up and out of there will generate those bites. Again, these baits have a lot of sound to them. They have a lot of vibration to them. And these fish are curious, right? They're down there, they're looking at that, they're like, what's that? And then it rips out and they just have to smoke it. So ripping a trap out of the grass is another way, another very common way to fish these baits this time of the year. And then last but not least, some guys will call this like the burn and kill kind of retrieve. You might hear that. That's just basically what I was talking about earlier, changing your cadence, changing your reel turn cadence, that burn, pause, rip and kill. That's what that's referring to. So again, being able to fish these things fast, fish them effectively, efficiently is what makes these things so special. All right, now that we've talked about where to fish these, why they work so well, how to fish them, let's actually talk about the key baits themselves. Like I said, Matt and I, we have a sickness, right? We do the hard work for you. We try to, we fish basically every bait on the market to try and figure out what works well and why. And it's interesting, as much as Matt and I, we travel around the country, we're blessed enough to be able to travel around the country to fish the different types of fisheries and really kind of experience it all and see what baits work the best on the different types of fisheries. So it doesn't matter if you're fishing a West Coast natural lake like Clear Lake, or you're fishing out here in the southeast on a TVA lake, the Tennessee River, whether it's Gunnersville or Chickamauga, or, you know, any of those, Pickwick, any of these big lakes out here, it doesn't matter. Lipless crankbaits, we've caught fish in every single one of them. So to start off, I want to talk about this guy right here. That is the Jackal TN70. So it's there's a 70 size, a 60 size, and a 50 size. We'll link all this stuff down below in the video description. What that has to do with is the actual size of the bait and the weight of the bait. For this bait right here, I like that TN70. It's a heavier bait, and I have a lot of success yo-yoing this bait. You'll see it's actually the bait I have tied on to my combo right here. This is a bait that yo-yos extremely well. It's got a tungsten weight molded onto the chin, so it kind of sits down nose first. It rips cleanly through grass. It is really easy to fish around grass edges. I don't like, I won't say that. There are other baits that I like to fish over the tops of grass and do that ripping technique. With this being a little bit smaller bait and heavier bait, it gets down in that grass too much, and you don't need to be getting actual like snagged, right? But that guy right there is an amazing lipless crankbait. Now I want you to hear this. Hear that versus, got the hooks just a second. So there are a couple different tones that I also want to talk about, but understanding that this TN70, since we've You're fine. Since we've moved back east, this guy has been our #1 fish producing bait. I don't know if it's the sound or the difference in vibration, but fishing this around or with other lipless crankbaits, this has been our key. It doesn't matter if we're going up north or even fishing down in Florida, out here on the Tennessee River. That TN70 is an amazing little lipless crankbait. Now, I will say a lot of these lipless crankbaits come with fairly good terminal tackle, you know, rings and hooks. But I will say for the most part, for me, I do change out all my rings and hooks. Now, if you're a guy that wants to just go grab a rattle trap out of the package, all right, just grab a package, pull it out. I will say, like I talked about earlier, you know, some of these companies have done a really good job at upgrading the rings and hooks on there, so you don't have to spend that extra money. You know, some of these baits are, you know, 15, 17 bucks. You don't want to have to go buy you know, rings and put hooks on it. But I will say, if you're fishing around big fish, I like to upgrade my hooks, and I'll link that stuff down below in the video description. We'll cover that here shortly. But that guy right there, that is an amazing tight wobble lipless crankbait. And again, my favorite way to fish this guy right here is the yo-yo technique. The OG, this is the original lipless crankbait, the rattle trap. Now, this is a bait that doesn't break the bank. It's fairly inexpensive in the category. Like I talked about just a little bit ago, it does come with upgraded hooks, but this is a bait that is light, considerably lighter. You know, this is like a ½ ounce bait. So even though it's as the same size or maybe a little bit bigger, might as well talk about these two right here. This is the hammer trap. This is the new one from Bill Lewis. So OG, the hammer trap, the new guy. These are both ½ ounce baits, but you can see how big they are and great sound. These are the baits that I like to fish around and over the grass because they're a bigger profile. They don't sink as quickly. It's something that I can burn over the tops of grass. It's something I can throw to those fish that are blowing up. It's something that I could fish like a chuck and wind bait, like a spinner bait along flats as this water drops. That is my go-to. So either the original or the hammer trap, just a different sound. Different sound, a little bit different profile. But these, like I said, even though these baits are big, they don't fall as quickly, and they work extremely well for that ripping a trap, you know, out of the grass, or, you know, burning them. They work extremely well for those types of retrieves. Now, the last two baits that I want to talk to you about before we talk about hook upgrades and stuff, this guy right here, this is a bait that Matt and I we discovered, I don't know, a couple years ago, just playing around. This is the Nomad. That is the Swim Trex Max. That is a 3/4 ounce bait. So you can see the size difference. ½ ounce bait, 3/4 ounce bait. This one's great for chucking and winding, fishing over the tops of grass. This is another one of those baits that's key for that yo-yo technique. It's a different sound. It's a higher pitch, it's more subtle. This bait comes with, it's a patented line tie system that adjusts for your, it's like a self-adjusting line tie. So the bait is always running true. And if you put wrong hooks or the wrong size hooks, or you have like a bent line tie, some of these baits won't run true, and you get that real off camber or off kilt wobble. This bait won't do that. It's always true. But again, having that smaller profile matches those bait fish really well, but it gets down quickly. This is a bait that you can fish deeper. So if you're fishing a main lake point out off, you know, in that 20-25 foot range, or heck, even if you're making a bomber cast to 6 inches of water in the very back of a flat, having that 3/4 ounce bait allows you to fish farther and fish deeper. But again, nice tight wobble. It's got brass and glass rattles in it, so it's got a nice tight hard thump to it. But that thing works extremely well. It runs true, it hops really well, and again, being 3/4 ounce, when you hop it and you kill it and that bait falls and hits bottom, boom, you get that reaction jig bite, and it is so much fun. All right, last but not least, I can't do a lipless crankbait video without talking about this guy right here. That is the Lucky Craft LV 500. This is also a 3/4 ounce bait. It is also a bait that works extremely well for that yo-yo technique. Little different sounds, right? That guy right there. Ghost Minnow is a great color. American Shad's a great color. We're gonna talk about colors here in just a second, but that guy has produced a lot of big fish for us. Again, it's another bait that has a real tight, hard thump to it. It's another bait that you can fish shallow, can fish deep. But again, with that over the TN70, different sound. Out on the West Coast, it seemed like this was the king. That was the rattle trap or the lipless crankbait of choice. And out east of the Mississippi, seems like this guy right here, for whatever reason, the fish like this guy better. So 2 great lipless crankbaits. Again, 3/4 ounce, works extremely well for that hopping technique. Now let's talk about some hook upgrades real quick, because when you finally do get that fish of a lifetime bite, you don't want to lose that fish. There's some key hooks that really help increase your hook to land ratio. So let's talk about those. Like I said earlier in today's video, we talked about most lipless crankbaits coming out of the package these days with upgraded hooks. Now you can see these guys right here, that's that hammer trap. That has an EWG style hook, so it's angled in. Where those work extremely well, one, if you're fishing around grass, right? Having those hook points in, or if you're fishing around laydowns, that sort of stuff where it's a snaggy area, having those hook points tipped in will help avoid a little bit of it. It'll help it fish cleaner through the grass. But more importantly, when they eat that bait, having that angled hook point keeps those fish pegged really well. The downside, if you're on a fishery and you're chucking and whining and you're just burning, maybe you're burning for schooling fish, offshore spotted bass or something like that, and they're just slapping at the bait, a lot of times they will miss that hook, or they'll just kind of get skin hooked, and halfway through the fight they'll come off. So if they're not eating the bait, I like to go with a round bend, right? So whether it's an Owner ST36, I buy them in the pro packs. An ST36 is more of a round bend hook. Works extremely well. It's a 1X hook, so it's not a light wire, but it is a 1X hook. And then if you're fishing around big fish here on the Tennessee River or Clear Lake or wherever it may be, same thing, the Owner ST56. That's a 3X hook, and that's a hook that we like to run, like I said, on our lipless crankbaits if we're fishing around big fish. The only other hook, that guy right there, that's the Gamakatsu EWG. That thing is sticky sharp and works extremely well. On lipless crankbaits, like I said. That one works good. And then if you're a guy that wants to throw an upsized hook, so instead of like a 4 and a 6, you want to throw like a size larger, you can actually go with this guy right here. This is a 1X hook, but it's a short shank. So shorter, but bigger gap. So the hooks won't foul. A lot of times, a lot of guys like to throw a short shank treble hook on their square bills and on their lipless cranks, but that thing works. Those guys work extremely well. And then last but not least, make sure you're upgrading your split rings, whether it's a Owner Hyperwire or your favorite split rings. I like the Owner Hyperwire, very strong, whether it's a size 3 or size 4. That is really key too, because I don't want you to hook that fish and then lose it because your split ring, straightens out. But as far as rods, Matt and I, we've had, I don't know, a lot of different lipless crankbait rods. We've tried a bunch of them. And what you want with a lipless crank rod, you want a good parabolic bend. You want a rod that loads deep into the blank, right? You want a rod that, when you hook a fish on a 3/4 ounce bait and they come up tail walking and you have that bait just in the lip of the front of their mouth and it's shaking out in front, you have 3/4 ounce out there flapping around, right? Really easy for those fish to spit that bait. So you want a bait or a rod that has a good more of like a moderate action, like a moderate, just a slower taper to it. So it loads deeper into the blank down here in that midsection. So when those fish do come up and shake, head thrash, that tip is not loading and unloading, right? It stays loaded, keeps pressure on those hook points, and you will lose a lot less fish having the right rod. So hands down, our favorite lipless crankbait rod is this guy right here. It's by Loomis. It's the 855 CBR. Loomis did an upgrade a few years ago. It used to be the 845, but that is, I'll read it to you, that's a 7'1". They say fast action, but it's more of like a moderate fast action. And again, it loads really good down here in the midsection and plays those fish extremely well. As far as reels, I like to have some kind of burner reel on there. Again, whether I'm chucking and winding and covering water quickly, or I'm doing that hopping technique, I want to be able to reel down, take up that line slack, and when I get that vibration and drop, I get that bite, I can reel down and load into them. So I throw a 7-to-1 or an 8-to-1 gear ratio reel, typically braid to leader. I like to be able to have that sensitivity. I can tell when a fish, when I whack a fish with a bait, I can tell when a fish kind of charges a bait and pushes it. Having that braid, it makes that bait more sensitive, but it also makes it more reactive. So whether you're doing that hopping technique, letting it fall, or you're doing that ripping technique out of the grass, having braid to a leader works extremely well. If I'm fishing around wood, I'll go braid to like a monofilament leader, whether it's like 12 to 15 pound line. And then typically I'm throwing braid to a fluorocarbon leader, like 12 to 16, depending on the size class I'm around. But braid to a leader works extremely well. Another combo that is awesome for this technique. This is a Legend tournament by St. Croix. This is the Carbon Cranker. Again, has that same action that I just described, loads deeper into that midsection and keeps those fish pegged really well. And then again, I have a SLX MGL. This bait, this reel can send a bait a country mile. Works extremely well on that chuck and wind retrieve. But again, having the right rod, having that right, enough tip to be able to get that bait to rip out of the grass, but also a soft enough tip that when you do get that bait hooked in that fish's mouth, it's not going to come out with those head shakes. And then last but not least, I actually have a budget combo for you guys. Again, we'll link all this stuff down below in the video description. But Dobyns, the Maverick series, has a 7-foot 5 power, but it's a crank rod. So again, it has more of that parabolic bend in that midsection. And just pair that up with that's a Daiwa Aired 80, just a combo that's around 200 bucks that works extremely well for square bills and works extremely well for lipless cranks. But guys, if you're not throwing a lipless crankbait in the fall, you guys are truly missing out. Being able to fish fast, being able to fish efficiently, effectively, cover water, eliminate water, find those active fish, is what it's all about. And a lipless crankbait is one of the best ways to do that. Again, it doesn't matter if you're fishing in 30 feet of water or 6 inches of water. These fish are active, they're aggressively eating, feeding up for winter, and a lipless crankbait is one of the best ways to put those fish in the boat. If you guys have any questions, please leave those down below in the comment section. I'll try to get those as soon as possible. But as always, guys, we appreciate the support. If you learned something from this video or you like this video, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and we will see you guys on the next video.